Handcrafted games, and I've got an absolute crap ton of stuff to go through. There's a whole bunch of tools that I've used for games that I've released that just generate stuff and do a lot of the work for me because I work solo, and if I didn't use these kind of tools, I would never get to the end of it.
Generally, when we're talking about procedural generation, we are talking about
one of these 6 types of things. Tiles, everyone knows kind of like board games, puzzles that are made out of blocks of like content that you've made that are then assembled in a grid or hex grid or something like that. Grammars is taking bits of text and replacing a bit of that text with another bit of text that you've got. That can also like branch off and eventually have huge chunks of content, text, images, anything that is built from other randomly selected things. Distribution, scouring. Parametric is kind of a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. It was just taking stuff that you put in and just generating content based on that. Interpreted is like also a thing that I do a lot, where I daisy chain a whole bunch of generators together. So I take the output from Tracery and I plug it into an audio tool, and I plug it into this, and you end up getting very complicated stuff that looks like it's hand done because you can't quite see where it's been made. And simulations, which I don't really get into a lot with this, which is agent-based simulation where you have like cellular or Smart, and just kind of run and do its thing, and then you take the result at the end and say that you did it. Procedural generation is not about luck, it is about numbers and getting the kind of randomness that you want by choosing the inputs that you get. It's everything from picking a single word to like replacing a piece of text to making an entire planet like No Man's Sky style. Is just about knowing how to manipulate random numbers. I'm not going to get huge into the coding because a lot of the tools I use are like designed to be simple. But you can get into like really high level math with this. Text is really easy to like procedurally generate. You can just have a bunch of words in an array and then generate a random number and pick a random word. But also translating between text and time is really important, because if you're procedurally generating an amount of text, you want to know how long it's going to take a player to read through that. Because like if you generate 80 hours of text content and you're making a 2-hour game, you probably don't need that much, and you're probably getting a lot more noise and a lot less quality. Killing Time of Lightspeed is a game I did. On every page of that game, there was probably about 3,000 words. By the page, click on alerts, scanning around. That generally means like the 6-minute audio track that I had to go with that loops twice or 3 times, which is not too bad, but it's like it's enough to know that if you're making that much content, how that relates to other pieces of content that you're also dealing with. Procedural text. Tracery is the best tool ever made for procedural text. It is simple. It is JSON based. I've like included like my version of Hello World code here is literally just a JavaScript array and then another JavaScript array, and then you say, get me a random greeting, get me a random term for the planet, and then you get, hey there world, or greetings Earth, or it's like any combination of those things. You can then also like include greetings planet as like a random thing and reuse it through a thing. So like all the greetings in your game can be one of those, and that gets random roll from the start, and it's consistent, but is also procedurally generated. Color is also numbers. Hex is a terrible numbering system for colors, but we use it in web dev all the time. RGB is a little bit better because you can kind of just manipulate channels individually. The best one, like the most human compatible, is HSV, which Photoshop uses if you can like tweak the settings. It's not common in web, it's not common in games as much, but it means you have a hue, a saturation, and a brightness value. Which means you can just kind of like, if you need to rotate the hue, you can just like tweak that one number and you get the same brightness but a different hue, which means you can generate color schemes really quickly because the way we perceive color as like looking good and natural together is like usually like it's a degree like this, and you rotate that around the color wheel, and those colors always look kind of nice together. You can procedurally generate this kind of math if you look up a math for it. It's a lot easier to use tools that are already out there. Colorline is one I really love because it's a neural net trained color scheme generator. So you can just like generate random color schemes over and over and over again. They all look kind of nice, and you can kind of use them for anything, and they're free. So why not? And take the pain out of like tweaking colors by like number. You can also just plug in, like, I plugged in a solid blue here, and then just like, okay, give me color schemes that work with this color that I have to use, right? So if you know what the key brand color for your thing is, you can just generate all the complementary colors and you can see what works with it. Next one is sound. Sound is a little bit harder, but like the math between the math expressing sound is really, really complicated, and I don't have time to go into it. There's pitch, duration, volume. Those can all be expressed as numbers. They can all be manipulated. You don't need to know the math of that because there's generators out there for this. VFXer and now Evo SFXer. These are like, they give you the video gaming bleeps and bloops that used to be generated by math. And they just give it to you as WAV files. Evo FXer I really like because you can kind of like pick a sample and another sample that you like, and it'll give you the average, and you can kind of like slowly hone in on the sound effect that you want, like slowly reducing the sample size. You can also write full-on generated music with Sonic Client. I haven't gotten into that much, so I don't have a lot of sample code for that. With about 8 lines of code, you can write like a full drum and bass track. It's unbelievably powerful. Images can also be expressed with numbers. Any bitmap image is a grid of numbers. Like, you can manipulate that data with any language. SVG is an XML file, so any kind of vector shape you can also generate because you're generating text. And we've used Tracery to generate text, so you can generate an XML file with Tracery and output a bunch of SVGs, and then you have procedurally generated images with very little coding. As well as using Tracery to do it, you can also use a thing that I really like called Hypetrain by an artist called Joshua Davis. This has been around since, probably a decade now, because I used it back when I was doing Flash programming. It's all written to look like jQuery style coding, so it's pretty beginner friendly, and it's designed by an artist, so like all of the art examples look really cool. Like this is just one of the demo files, and it takes an SVG and a set of colors, and it procedurally selects one of many SVG chunks in a grid, and then procedurally takes your color palette and applies it. It can do unbelievably powerful things. I should probably explain who I am, because I find it easy to talk about myself when I get going. So I'm John Kane. I've made games, I've made websites, I'm a web programmer by day, I make games in my spare time. I've released games on Steam, iOS. I'm currently working on an interactive comic and a narrative adventure game. I've also released a bunch of tools in the last couple of months. HTMLE, which is a HTML cross-compiler. So it takes an HTML, a JavaScript game, and puts it onto Steam for PC, Mac, Linux, and then puts it onto iOS and Android as well, with no coding involved. So you click a button and it spits out files. Vocoder, which is a thing that I did to generate placeholder voiceover files. So you put in a spreadsheet of text, and it makes a bunch of requests to translate and gets that text as audio files, so you can use those to start prototyping voiceover at the beginning of your game before you have to actually hire a voiceover artist. The cool thing you can do with that is you can plug things like Tracery into that, so you can have procedurally generated voiceover for your game before you even the script. And the other one I did is Window Dresser, which if you've ever had to release something on a Steam store or Google Play or iOS, you have to make like 80 storefront images all up. So I wrote a script to do that and I released it for free, so no one ever has to go through that again. Because I hated it. So this is Joshua Davis, who created Hype Framework. I just wanted to use his art as an example of how you can use procedurally generated stuff and still maintain control after that, because that is what he's been doing for more than a decade now. And his art is beautiful. All of these are done by hand, and then he's written algorithms to place them on a stage, and then he's gone in and also color them. And then he's gone in and sort of like removed the bits that didn't quite fit, or has shifted things. Like he still has control, but he can make 100,000 variations of this in a minute, and then pick the ones that look good, and then polish them. And that means he has like a really good strike rate of like just scattered images that look beautiful right off the bat, because the computer's generated 1,001 things, and his artist trained eye can then just pick which ones of that are good, which takes a lot of the work out of like doing it from hand, seeing if it's good, starting again, doing it from hand, seeing if it's good. Same thing. These are some things done more with like the simulation style things. So you've seen these kind of like dots that get kind of dragged around. These get simulated in real time, and it takes a snapshot that gets saved in it as a vector file, and they tweak them by hand. And these are mostly procedurally generated, but here he's split the image in half and reflected it. And here he's sort of recolored it by blocks. And here he's added some gradients in the background and tweaked the color balance by hand. So like, you can generate huge amounts of data and then manipulate it to make it look good. You can still be the curator of all this randomness. So don't think that like once you get on the procedurally generated content track, you have to stick with it forever. Starting out a new project, I mentioned vocoder. If you know kind of like, okay, so like a game I'm prototyping is probably going to be about 2 hours worth of content. I know how long that's going to take to read, and I can generate that number of lines. I can then use vocoder to translate that into audio files to test. Right? VFXer and SFXer, start early, start getting all your sounds in. You can curate them by hand and like then replace them later with the actual sound effects that you want, but using procedurally generated placeholder assets saves you days worth of work selecting that. You can get kind of something that's good enough to get going and start worrying about like how to make sure that those sounds work and how that content works, rather than getting it perfect and then starting and then realizing that the perfect thing that you've made doesn't work with the system that you're building. Translation is the one thing I am going to tell you never to do with, like, don't use Google Translate in your games. Please do not use Google Translate in your games. It never does a good enough job. What you should be doing is then using something like Tracery to pick a random language. Because, like, you know what the start button in your game is. Like, you know how to play your game, but you might not know whether, like, Ukrainian takes up too much space in that start button. And, like, so Turkish as well is a language that is about like 1.5 to 2 times as long for every word. So if you design your UI for English, it might not be big enough to handle all the other languages. So if you start early and start like procedurally just throwing in content in other languages, that will break your UI and you'll fix it first, rather than at the end of the project when you start putting in translations and just hit panic mode. Getting unstuck, I got stuck in Mallow drops really badly. I had to make 100 unique puzzles, handcrafted. I don't recommend anyone ever tries to make a game that way, ever. I got really burnt out trying to do this, but I figured out a way that works for me, and hopefully this works for you. The Mr. Squiggle approach, everyone's seen Mr. Squiggle and knows kind of what I talked about with Mr. Squiggle. It's like you start with kind of a half, shaped triangles, circles, weird lines, and then you see that half image and you can see a shape that is buried in it, and you kind of pull that out and play with it. If you haven't played Mallow or don't know what I'm talking about, a puzzle looks like this. I had to hand do 100 of these. In fact, it was probably more like 150 because then I edited it down. If you want to make tile sets that look like this, there's a program called Auto Tile Gen. You can basically just put in an image and the editors, and it will do all the work for you, and it saves you just hours. And if you look for bitwise mapping, that's a technique to take just that tile set and apply it in like a brush, and it just figures out what edges are supposed to be there. But in my editor, I made a thing that was not it's not good enough to be a level, but it's good enough to be just a Mr. Squiggle level. So I can see a shape like that. I go, oh, okay, you could probably move a block up and down there, and you can get started putting in the puzzle pieces. It's enough to just prop gen to get you moving. I found that's actually where I use prop gen the most, is just to get the ball rolling with something there, and getting from 0 to having something is way, way harder than getting from something to a finished set. So you can use prop gen for that and still be in total complete control for the second 90% of your work. And it's still totally curated. Okay, I've talked about this now and then in public, but the big secret of killing time at Lightspeed is that your choices don't matter. The branching is totally pre-rolled from the start. Your dialogue choices matter, and the way the characters respond to you throughout the game will matter, but the actual overarching narrative is random roll from the start, and you don't get to pick the outcome, which is the reverse of a lot of narrative games. Each character has their own branch in the middle, and it then sort of splits out and then comes back into the decided ending. They all get picked at the start, whether it's branch A or branch B, and overall it just becomes a tangled mess and no one can really see where the edges are. It's not a chapter and then you get a different chapter. It's more trying to read 10 books at once, all with a split. Everyone's playthrough ends up unique, so they think that their choices mattered a lot more than they did, and it makes the game feel bigger. And I think that is the second part of where I use procedural generation a lot, is you can make the game feel bigger and more fleshed out than it is by having a lot of small details or a lot of allusions to it being bigger, because if there's this much possibility, then there could be this much possibility. Cool. Yeah, it's not the type of game you replace, so you don't actually see the edges with that. Finally, I'm going to go into kind of polish, making things look nice. Does anyone know what greebling is? Can I see a show of hands if you know what greebling is? Star Wars fans know what greebling is. It's a thing George Lucas came up with, getting through airport security with a whole bunch of pipes and weird stuff. Greebling is why Star Wars looks like Star Wars. It's the ships are all bumpy. Procedural generation is great for greebling. In Mallow, all these mushrooms are just a random brush that I apply to every horizontal grass surface. Same with the grass around the tree. Every time there was a tree, I just took a grass brush. That's each pile of that is one of 30 grass sprites. Each mushroom is one of 60. All these little details fill in the gaps and make your game look a lot more polished. And if you use procedural generation techniques, which is really just at this point random numbers, it's a lot easier than it should be. Same thing here. The edges are procedurally generated. The blocks, in a really basic game, those blocks will be the same sprite, but they're one of many different possible sprites, and so the game looks like it has a lot more depth. to its design. Same with trees. Knowing when you're textures to just like put joins on things will also make your procedurally generated stuff look like it's meant to be there. All of the texture for the tentacles and the little offshoots were random, but that little gap makes it look like it's meant to be there. This is a better shot of greebling. Greebling can also be applied to things that aren't visual. It's filling in little details everywhere, making sure that like NPCs have, like, you can almost have a greebled story, like give them a favorite color, give them a favorite food, give them like preferences and backstory, and you can procedurally generate all that stuff and it makes your world feel huge. So you should do it. I need to for everything at the end. Getting ready for sale, I mentioned doing window dresser. You can also use Tracery to procedurally generate your storefront page text. Don't just go with that. But don't just like generate a bunch of garbage and throw it on the store. Use procedurally generation to put together a bunch of phrases that you think work, and then put them in different order, and then test like all of them with a whole bunch of different people and see what actually sticks. Then pick from there what actually works and use it. Like, it's very hard for me as a writer to just like write a perfect line off the top of the bat. It doesn't happen. But I can write 100 things, and I can try 100 things and see what works with 100 things, and then use what I think is best out of that. Like, people are actually a really good procedural generation tool. Just use human brains to like select stuff for you if you can't get over that hump yourself. Finally, making your own tools. I use Node.js and Grunt, which is a task runner. It basically just runs JavaScripts on your machine as though they were native code, so you can do stuff like saving files, converting stuff from one to another. JSON is a great format for doing things like that, because everything you can take JSON in or put JSON out, which means you can daisy chain things. A lot of my tools end up being like weird human centipede things, where you just like take the output from one thing, put it into the next, put it into the next, put it into the next, and you end up with like, you can have like 1,000 different things from one shape. Here are all of the things I've listed today. This is the one to take the screenshot of if you can. I'm going to put all the slides up on Twitter later today. And I am Griffith on Twitter or john@griffith.net. If you have any questions, just shout at me on Twitter. That's probably the best place to get in touch. That was a really like shotgun run through of every tool I know about and how I use them. I hope it was helpful for you. I hope you'll all start like making your own tools or trying the tools that are out there. And if you make something cool, show me, because I want to steal it. Okay.